The Olam Atzilas, even the Zav Olam Atzilas, especially which he's talking about over here, doesn't get light directly from Abba or from Ein Sof, right? Because it goes, Ein Sof goes to Chachma, and Chachma goes to Bina, and Bina goes into Zah. And then from Bina, he said that Haarizal always calls it a window. What we call the Yisad Emma is a window from the Zan. We talk about windows, of course. Windows in heaven are a biblical image. So there's a gate, a door, an opening into heaven, which is the Makam Migdash. And that's an image of as if everything is closed off, but we left you one little space, and that's also the image of Tzimtzum that Haarizal generally has. We left you one little space, and through that, the light from the higher level gets to you. So you get a little bit of the same. We can call it, this is not a translation, but a sort of mi'ut. It's not that you're getting it only in translation. You could understand one word of the whole book, right? So if there's a whole book which explains Divrei Chachma, this is a Chabad style mushal, then if you would understand only one chapter, and maybe that chapter is the most important one, or the least important one, we could have differences of that, which part or which word, but at least you have one word of it, and you don't have the entirety of it, but you have part of it. Then we could just take the whole book and put it through a translation machine. Then you don't even get anything of it. You get just the entire, maybe even get more, but entirely translation. Now the different levels of these chaloines and mesachim are really what defines the difference between different olamas and different spheres in olam atzilas even. That Haarizal explains this in great detail. And in any case, so therefore, as long as you're in olam atzilas, of course olam atzilas is itself some sort of masach, but let's not consider that. Now, what makes Olam Atzilas and Olam Abriya distinct worlds, as opposed to just different levels, is that between the Olam Atzilas and Olam Abriya, there is not any space, there's not any hole, there's not any window that you can see from Olam Atzilas through Olam Abriya, at least not in a simple way. But what there is a masach, a pereches, a curtain, a real boundary between Olam Atzilas and Olam Hayetzira and Olam Abriya, and everything Olam Atzilas, Olam Abriya will be through that masach. It cannot get anything directly from Olam Atzilas, and that is really what makes Olam Abriya into a totally different world, right? When we think of the concept of world, what we usually think of is what you can imagine existing, right? So we can have a lot of different levels, like in this world, or a world. That, when I say a world, I don't mean literally a world. Haarizal does use very simple, literal images and talks about there being 4 floors, 4 flights, which are like 4 olamas, but that's just for the clarity of the thing. But when I talk, I'm just trying to give a little more concept. When you try to talk about a world, what I really mean is, in your world, there could be, for example, if someone grows up in a certain society, so to him, there are, of course, every society has Tzadik and Ben and there's no such a thing as a society without different levels, without different hierarchies, without different, at least different levels of people, right? There's good people, there's bad people, there's sort of normal people in between. Okay, so that's your world. So in other words, that world has itself like 10 spheres, like different levels. You could be Malchus of this world, you could be more clear about this world, you could be the highest level, you could be the Kesser of this world. That's the top. But nobody in this world imagines something that's entirely different, right? So nobody, I don't want to say examples to get people mad. Nobody in the standard Western world, nobody imagines something that's really a tzaddik, right? As an example. There's good people, there might be even inspired people, there might be all kinds of different things. But you need to actually enter into a religious world to even imagine that in your world should even exist something called a real tzaddik, and whatever real tzaddik means. And for us, I don't know what world I'm in. But you could see, if you straddle these worlds, you could see that there's a real difference in what people even imagine to be possible for a human being. If you, in America, yes, there's better people and worse people, and there's even great people, and actually they even heard of like what we call saints or holy people, but they don't really conceptualize it the way it's conceptualized within a religious world, where there's different concepts and different levels. So yeah, maybe it's a good person, maybe someone that dedicates himself to doing good and so on. And if you go into a Chassidish world, for example, then you'll hear about a tzaddik as someone that literally, and this is, of course, maybe it's an exaggeration, maybe this is what Kant called a regulative ideal, maybe it's just something that we hope to get to, but at least it's something that exists in this world. So of course, maybe we're in the Malchus of that world, and this is talking about Attic, okay, but at least there's something that exists. And we talk about, if you go into Chassidish stories and Chassidish books, you talk about it's a person that doesn't do any move without an intention, without a yichud, right? That doesn't, and there's literally the things that they say. Now, for this to even exist, it needs to be in a different world. So and if I want to go into America and explain them this, I can't. That's not the pshat. If I go to a Chassidish person, this is a very good word. If I go to a Chassidish person, I tell them, you maybe some days, maybe on Shabbos, maybe when you're in a good mood, maybe then you could eat with kavannos. You could for every bite you take, you could have some mechavan Hashem, right? That's kavannos haarizal. So that's your level. But if you imagine a tzaddik which does this all week, okay, so that he would be the attic of your world. Then you're in a different. But if I go to America and I start talking about this, it's not my problem. Is not that I can't get them to imagine someone that can do it 24 hours a day or 10 hours a day would be a lot, or 2 hours a day, right? Well, the problem is that I can't even explain to him what it would mean to eat a piece of pizza and be mechavan Hashem. He's like, what does that even mean? So I have to translate the whole thing into something else where it loses almost all of its meaning. It might, if I'm a good translator, I might be able to. There's people that work on this, this their job, to translate really holy things, really Chassidish Misogim, into the world of America. And I say, well, you could eat, I don't know, mindfully, right? That's the world. That's already a mitzvah. It's a psach hashmal. You could eat mindfully. And yes, that's a translation, but it totally doesn't mean what it means in the Chassidish world. And then we could talk about levels. So you could see very easily that there's something called being in one world. I'm in the same world as, if you're in the Chassidish world, you're in the same world as the Chassidish Tzadikim. Of course, you're not in their level. And then that would be called receiving Or through a light, through a little hole, through a little window. So you don't get the whole thing, of course, but you get some of it. You can get Tuf, and he gets Aleph. And then there's something called being in a totally different world, where everything is through a mechitza. Everything goes through a translation level, and you literally don't have access to any of the actual objects in that world. Okay, and this is one mushal. We think in a lot of different terms for this. I just want to give some sort of understanding, so we should be able to grasp onto this thing of